Hello, my name is Jehan and welcome to another episode of Katalyzing Conversations. We are delighted to have with us today the two key people at the Special Technology Zones Authority. Amer Hashmi, who's also a friend, was appointed chairman of STZA by the Prime Minister of Pakistan earlier this year. Before this, we know Amer was at NUST as advisor and chief strategy officer. And before that, I have known him from the time when he was president and CEO of SI3 in Karachi, prior to which he was with IBM in Canada for many years. Welcome, Amer.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mubariz Siddiqui. I'll be co-hosting the session with Jehan. I would also like to introduce the other member we have from the STZA, who is someone who is fairly well known in our startup industry. Rahim was previously the CIO at SECP and has now transitioned and actually was instrumental in a lot of the reforms pushed by the SECP to facilitate startups. Rahim is now at the STZA, looking to drive some of those similar reforms over here. So over to you, Jehan. I think you should start, and then we can progress the conversation.
Okay, so this may seem very basic, Amer, but what is a Special Technology Zone Authority? And what is the Special Technology Zone going to do? I mean, why was it set up in the first place?
That's a very good question, and thank you for hosting me on this conversation. I guess it's called Katalyst Labs, right? The organization itself. The dialogue. We're going to reach out to the startup community. So, Jana, as you know, my entire career has been in the tech world, and I had the time to spend in the mid-90s with the tech boom in the Valley itself, where Apple had gone belly up, and I got to go into a data center that was in Napa Valley, empty by Apple, so huge, like a football field. And we moved 3,500 mainframe servers from San Francisco into Napa Valley's data center. So I was 24 years old, so it was exciting. So I got to be in the center of the world for the tech boom. At that time, the startup culture was just growing. Chip manufacturing, software development was a prerequisite to being a big tech, that was part of their product lines. So for me, this is so exciting, personally and of course professionally, because I came back to Pakistan, as you know, 18 years ago. And these zones that we keep talking about, and a bit of a confusion between the STP and zones, which I'll clarify today, is we've never had in Pakistan full support from the government for the technology industry, right? So we've had incubation centers, we've got R&D centers in universities, we've got programs like Ignite. The government ministry has been trying, but remember the legislation that gives coverage to the technology industry to create that, we all talk about the enabling environment. And the reason it's unfortunate it didn't happen is because our surrounding neighbors, and of course, countries like the US, countries in Europe, and even the Far East got it many decades ago. Of course, in Asia, it happened just 2 decades ago. In some countries in the early 90s, so 3 decades. But Pakistan never got full support. When I mean full support, is the legislative cover for, let's say, all the way from getting subsidized rent, to subsidized internet, to subsidized rental space, to tax incentives, to the state bank helping you with your cross-border transactions in terms of sending money out, but also receiving it in, for venture capitalists to come and invest in startups here, for the R&D culture to blossom. So let me give you a very good example that we all know the Amazons of the world, but before the Amazons and Google, tech was Oracle, IBM, SAP, Dell, HP. So this is my world in the 90s, right? And when they came to Pakistan, it was important. We always paid them for their products. Whereas our neighbors, even up to, let's say, Bangladesh and even Korea started, they said, okay, if you come into our country, we're going to pay you for your products and services, but we also want our staff trained in the development of your product lines, whether they're software, services, or hardware. So we know how long IBM has been in Pakistan. We know how long Oracle, I'm an ex-IBMer in North America. We know how long Oracle's been in Pakistan. We know how long SAP. So the government of Pakistan and our private sector has given money out. We've never been able to harness that. Can young graduates, even in their university days, sit in a hub, a knowledge cluster to develop that level of software, and they invest in our own country. So the overall scheme is, it's a mini city. The size can depend. You can even call it a community when it's our minimum requirement in the authority is 5 acres. You can go up to 1,000 acres. That would be a mini city. So it's where everyone comes together. Your lab would be there, right? Startup community would be there. The big giants would also be there. Of course, R&D centers would be there. Not just universities are allowed, training centers for technical training are allowed. And imagine, right, you walk across the street in that hub, that cluster, and your venture capitalist is there. Your accounting firm is there. So Silicon Valley, we all heard about it. The word emerged because it was a tech hub. And then our side of the world just blossomed, right? And we're the last country. Anyone have any doubts about this venture? We're actually, the professionals that have come to Pakistan, they've said in 2010, when I got certified to be an expert in this area, they said you're 10 years late. So they were talking about 2000 and they came in 2010. So now it's 2021. So we're another 10 years late, right? So it's a good time to have this. And John, what you've been working on, the youth. Tech relates to youth and they relate to tech. So cement industry, textile industry, the sugar industry, defense industry, हमारी जो पाकिस्तान की youth है, they haven't been able to get that skill of job creation and that training in that, because that's not a global demand. हमारी internal consumption है, or export $20 to $25 billion in the last 20 years. That's nothing, right? So technology, which is just information technology, is 4.6 trillion. So for Pakistan's economic mix to grow, you need legislation where the government intervenes and ensures it's a self-regulated free market economy, gives all the perks and incentives for the industry to blossom, but steps away then and says, you can do your work here, we're here to support you, not check you and stop you from doing good things in technology.
Okay,
so I think
so
that covers it.
So Amer, the importance, you're so passionate about it and you've explained why you think it's important. But can you tell us where in the world something like the STZA has worked and what has been the vision for this? I know that, it will be useful once you set it up, and what you're talking about, it all sounds so amazing. But has it worked anywhere else in the world? I know you've been talking about it, I think, about software technology parks and zones forever. I remember ever since we met, you've been talking about this and the importance of this. But where has it worked in the world?
Very good question. So when the government got very serious to actually move on this, before I think even discussions of an authority, they said, let's study. So I've been, of course, my think tank background, right? So I've been working on examples where the economic growth in our region has catapulted, right? So the word that's been used in countries of course, China, we all know China is an example for a lot of things these days, but the word was used as special economic zones, right? And then that evolved. SEZs were given special legislation for a land parcel in a country, right? Because the third world countries have not been able to do forms for good governance. So all the heads of state and the heads of government have intervened to say, okay, can we take one area of a city and call it a special economic zone, give it a lot of different incentives and reforms that are in the first world? It's an experiment. And will they catapult our job employment, foreign direct investment, technology transfer? And the success stories that we used as a case study then when the authority was formed, and government examples, Korea is just a fantastic story, right? And I recall in Korea, when I visited in 2010, it was my first visit to Korea, and I went to a city called Daedok, Daedok, and it's actually called an Innopolis, right? The whole city, And I think, although I was young, I was in my, I think I was 36, 37, whatever, I felt old there because it was a number of universities. All I met was PhDs, masters in their below 30, working in R&D facilities, working in technology companies. And I'm being trained by this president of a university who's hands-on, and he's explaining us why a tech-driven knowledge economy was a strategic priority of the government in the late 70s, early 80s, where they even allocated a deputy prime minister. So the whole storyline becomes technology is important. Why, Janara? Right? Because knowledge creation is where your economic growth can take place. Pakistan has never concentrated on knowledge. If tech were not to produce knowledge, then we would reconsider, do we need STZs? So tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, I'd say equals a knowledge economy, which will allow Pakistan to have a higher export than, of course, $25 billion, right, that we've had for the last 20 years. It goes up and down by 5 billion, and हमारी export के अलावा हमारी GDP growth भी catapult हो सकती है. GDP growth means, you keep hearing it, I'm sure more than me, because you've been, mashallah, president of Pasha, you've worked with so many young startups, is where are we going to employ our 130 million under the age of 35 or 30, right? I talked about the 4 large sectors. They're not going to employ our youth because our youth are coming out with master's degrees, bachelor's degrees. So where are these people going to go if they don't brain drain नहीं होएगा, इधर ही रहेंगे. अगर आपके टेक्नोलॉजी जोन्स पाकिस्तान में ना बने और ये incentives ना होए, इनकी innovation kill हो जाएगी, right? So I call this fast track war footing पे ये बनाने चाहिए. That's how much convinced I am. So Korea used an example. Japan did it much earlier. The Philippines has done it. Of course, China, Shenzhen's a glowing example for the world. It's the Silicon Valley. Singapore, fantastic. Hong Kong, fantastic. Europe had started three decades earlier. Silicon Valley is a tech zone. There's one in North Carolina. They're in New York. So India, our neighbor, they have about 350 of them. So there's justification. And I've been to the standing committee at the National Assembly, and it was a fantastic exercise because after all my members, all the members of the National Assembly, even from the opposition, at the end of it agreed that this is a must, right? So it was a fantastic exercise to get our legislators to understand this is critical for Pakistan's economic mix.
So Amer, I would jump in right now. And a couple of things you said about us being 20 odd years too late, which reminded me of this Chinese proverb that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and the second best time is now, right? So I'm glad it's happening now. But another thing that you mentioned, which is very important, and as someone who deals with a lot of startups and speaks to them frequently, whenever I mention the STZA, there's this generally a lack of understanding around it with startups. And given the startups are very nimble organizations where they're mostly working remotely, the first question I get asked is, listen, do we have to get an office and does everyone need to be sitting in STZA, or can we just have our main office there and people can still be remote and expanding across the country? So there's a lot of it's quite mystified for at least for smaller businesses and startups right now. So could you just shed some light, and even if Rahim wants to jump in here, shed some light around how this would work for startups, and what kind of startups are welcome and what kind of startups are not, except because what kind of companies would not be part of the STZA?
And also SMEs. I mean, startups and SMEs, I would
SMEs,
think.
yeah, both.
So I'll give you a brief into this, and then I'll ask Rahim to expand because he's had a lot of experience dealing with the startups practically right now. So one, yes, apologies. We didn't do a mass awareness campaign, and the reason I wanted to make sure that the bill is passed, right? Because ordinance can lapse. So one of my own personal feeling along with our management team was we make sure that we convince the National Assembly of Pakistan, and then we should get out there. So there'll be a campaign you'll see in August that's going to start. So we'll get a lot of people out there understanding this. The questions of a startup, can you stay here, not stay here? So let's put on a hat. Let me walk you through a case study of a startup. A startup, typically, let's say maybe 5 to 10 people, low on cash. They may have family and friends funding. So they get to come into a special technology zone. They get a zone license. For a startup, I think it's almost free. We're not even charging a fee. So the physical location is not the issue. It's where they are. If there's existing startups in Pakistan that are in a large cluster, the authority is allowed to assess that area. They can apply and we can declare an STZ. Minimum required in a city would be 5 acres or 250,000 square feet of buildup. And it doesn't have to be all connected. It can be across the street and you can say, okay, this is a 1 kilometer radius and there's 250,000 square feet and there's startups here, we can declare that. But the big land parcels that are being made, startups ke liye benefit is tremendous. And the reason it's tremendous is right now, typically startups have high cost, three of them. One is their rent, typically their ISP bill, and of course, electricity. So in a tech zone, that's where the government intervenes and says, the tech zone, it's the state's responsibility to subsidize that for you. So the developers in the zone have gotten those tax incentives of 10-year income tax waiver. They're able to import equipment in. So they've got such a good cash flow that when they rent out space to them, our mandate is that make sure that it's subsidized, right? And it's very high quality. So let's take an example. I've lived in Karachi. Karachi mein Sharia Faisal pe, or any other cluster where tech companies sit. One, it's expensive. Second, it's very difficult. Third, aesthetically, it's not a fun place to work at. So zones are very, very attractive. You should be able to walk in, you get a cafe feeling, incubation centers hoenge, VC hoega, or aapko ZE license agar mila hoega, you'll be able to go through that one window. So that's the key. And that's where I'm going to ask Rahim to jump in, is the startup faces so many difficulties that they aren't be able to do their FBR, their registration with SCCP, connecting with the VC, State Bank. So we as an authority are going to make a one window for them. In fact, it's already been designed. It has to be automated. And because Rahim has already done it for SCCP, I'm going to ask him to jump in there, not just startup, but he'll go through why the startup gets so many benefits with STZ. Rahim, over you.
Thank you, Amer. And I think, Mubariz, to your question, so one is just not the incentives and like Amer mentioned, all the benefits which the startups will get. I think it's also important to understand that by being in a zone or in a cluster where there's also industry linkage, right? So what we are trying to build is eventually a knowledge ecosystem. So like Jehan said, it's just not startups, but also for SMEs. And I think, like Amer mentioned, the license fee, I think it's waived for startups, and the application fee even is very, very minimal. So the idea is the youth, the young entrepreneurs, we facilitate them to develop this innovation and this taking culture, which is very integral to the knowledge ecosystem. So the other bit being with the linkage with the universities, with the academia. So the idea is to commercialize the knowledge-based output. So it's very critical, and that will only happen when that association is built with the startups and SMEs, and that linkage has to be extremely strong. Similarly, we will also have accelerators. The plan is to have accelerators in the universities. And we already, Amer and myself, we've been talking to various VCs, both local and international. And there's a lot of interest. So they want to move in and, establish their offices. So we can start creating all those linkages where both from a, office rent perspective, utility perspective, which are subsidized, but we also, create all the investor linkages, the knowledge ecosystem linkages as well. So it provides the 360-degree support which the startup today needs to increase the scale. On the one window, so we worked closely, Mubariz, yourself and myself, and I worked with other people as well. And also, the focus at SCCP has been to digitize, drive reforms, make processes simpler, and eventually we end up integrating with numerous entities in the public sector. And we can all see the results, right? So the number of companies, the ease of doing business, the improvement in the World Bank ease of doing ranking as well. So, like Amer mentioned, so the idea is we will, to the extent possible, facilitate, take care. We will both have a system online one window as well as a physical one window. And we are already already having conversations. I've spoken to most of the government agencies, which are critical and critical to make sure that we facilitate the zone enterprises and zone developers. So be it SCCP, FBR, Ministry of Interior, etc., and so on. So we will work with them. They're already work in process, and so it will be done in a phased manner. We eventually end up where everything should be done through one portal. The other, I just wanted to add what Amer said, the importance of the legislation, right? So Mubariz and Jehan, you both know we got the changes done in the company laws, right? State Bank changed a lot of their policies and procedures. The SCCP changed a lot of its regulations and the rules. And you can see what happened in 2019 now, the results coming in 2021 now. So the kind of funding the startups are raising, the investor interest, all because it just became easy to come in and invest into Pakistan. And I think with the STZA and developing the STZs, the idea is the same, to provide similar, both from a process perspective and legislative purpose, that ecosystem. So, we can be that enabler and provide that enabling environment to the entire technology sector and just not IT.
If I can just add one important comment about the startup and SME. The other important aspect is why we would want startup clusters to also move into a physical land parcel, and we'd make that transition pretty easy. I've worked in two of them. So I've worked in one in Silicon Valley, and in the city of Toronto, there's a suburb called Markham, and that's where IBM's head office was. So and the city of Markham invited all the big tech giants of the US and said, come here, we're going to give you special incentives. So Markham mein sare aage, including IBM's, which was a workforce of 20,000 people in the IBM office. So the subcontractors around Markham who were there as startups got a lot of our outsourcing work because IBM was doing $10 billion a year. So just startup, the benefit I see, if you're a small company, 5-10 people, you get one big order from an anchor tenant. Oh, your whole year is fantastic. And then you need more people. Your universities there, your training facilities are there, right? So you get to hire, right? And then you walk over, you say, oh, I need about maybe $100,000 more. The VC is already watching you and say, oh, they just want a big contract from General Electric. And they say, we know their cash flows are good. So that ecosystem, when you put hundreds together in a cluster, it just catapults. And I've seen it live, right? So just startup ko Pakistan mein, and I think I'll do one on just startups, them being in their own building as opposed to sitting where the big anchor tenants are. They're going to get work. They may even get bought out, So there's so many advantages.
So Amer, so that sounds really exciting. But so, we understand now how startups and SMEs are going to fit in. Can you give us an indication now that STZA has been launched and you've started promoting it? I saw some posts on LinkedIn, etc. What is the kind of response that you've received so far from both international as well as local tech players? Has it been great? Has it been lukewarm? What kind of response have you seen so far?
Good. Another good question. So there are technical terms we had to use. A zone enterprise is basically a company. So it can be a small company with 3-4 people, and it can be a large company. It's called a zone enterprise. A zone developer is the one that will build the large land parcels within a zone. So there'll be multiple zone developers, but there'll even be more zone enterprises. And yes, a zone enterprise can be a zone developer. So some large companies in Pakistan that are very large, they're doing very well. So they've come to us and said that, Amer, we just don't want our building. We'd like to take 2-3 acres and we want to provide other, because we'll feed off of them as well. And we'll take rent from them. and they already had their alliances. So the demand part that you asked and the market response, I'd say not just great, phenomenal. And why phenomenal is the global companies that have reached out. They said that the prime minister said, make sure that we become the most attractive. So the Prime Minister of Pakistan sat in meetings with the finance minister, the state bank governor, the FBR chairman, the SCCP chairman, the Secretary of Interior, because of the visas and foreign workers coming, getting checks and balances. Who else? Commerce, industries, every related that would help the STZA. And he sat in multiple meetings to ensure that we are the most friendly. So we're going to have an infographic out for you soon. They'll show Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, and it'll show why Pakistan beats them and all the 10-year incentives. So that's brought in some demand. I'd like to take the names. You already know them, right? So I don't want to because we haven't signed the contracts. But yes, Fortune 100 tech, not all companies, tech Fortune 100, about 15 are serious and 5 are committed already to Islamabad Technopolis, right? And the way it's going to work is I'll also clarify the strategy, which will be helpful for everyone that will be your audience when you share this, is the STZA is allowed to be a developer, right? Hence the bill that was passed. However, we want the private sector to develop it. So because we have certified people in the knowledge ecosystem, so the Prime Minister requested that the flagship project be made in Islamabad where we implement it. And we can move much faster because we just hop across for approvals. Me sitting in this role, we have an SPV where Technopolis is owned by STZA. However, the provincial rollout will not be like that, and I'll explain why. So the 140 acres that the government gave to STZA has the demand from anchor global tenants. So these are the big billion-dollar companies, from SMEs. SMEs globally are larger than even $100 million in revenue. The large tech players of Pakistan, startups, universities, and exciting government R&D centers, because government R&D are stuck in their ministries. Our authority is a little more swift. So they're saying, can we shift and do our R&D there? We said, sure. So 150 acres, I think applications have already started coming. Expression of interest is, I think, about 50. We'll start processing them. Our turnaround time will be 10 days through that one window. So it's very fast. Automation, Rahim is doing because he just joined us. So right now it's a manual process, but with speed. So it'll become all automated. And startups, what we're trying to do for startups, Janai, because I know that's your area where you'll be concerned, how the small players, we're going to get an area, a building for them, because time lagega infrastructure mein. The manufacturers are putting up prefabs to start their production quickly. The software houses that can afford to, they'll put up their buildings. It'll take about till December to get Islamabad. I think that'll look physically ready. But we'll get a building where they can apply for the ZE license, the subsidized rent, the internet facility, the power, and the one window. So we're going to quickly move them into the Technopolis of a building next to the zone.
Super. I just had one question around the kind of startups that can just come in December, and very happy to hear these timelines. Another very frequently asked question around this by startups is, can an existing business be part of it? And what kind of businesses have been defined as a technology business? So if I'm an e-commerce player who's selling physical goods online, is that a technology company, or does it have to be actually delivering a technology product or service?
So yeah, absolutely. If you're a new company, we want you. So one feedback in the government circles was, जो पुरानी companies हैं उनको नहीं status देना है SE का, उनको ही तो देना है. अगर आप running business हैं, आपका revenue let's say $1 million है. If you come into the zone, we want you to get to $10 million and 50 and 100, right? So they're more important than the new startups. You know what I mean? Existing IT companies is where बहुत ज़्यादा फायदा मिलेगा ना, right? So yes, you brand new, you can get a license, and if you're an older company, so we have a strict criteria. You can download that from the web. We can even share it with you. And now it's printed in the Gazette. They're called the STZA rules. The last couple of pages of the criteria, it's pretty straightforward. And the scope, you're saying, what scope? In tech, it's such a vast field. So this is where I'm actually explaining to people that tech is more than software development. And when I met Janara, when I moved back to Pakistan, I said, Janara, why is it just called software houses? Software houses means just software. Because I came from a systems integration, IT outsourcing. And then Janara was quick. She realized it, and she had a CAC meeting, I think, and she said, why don't we write IT-enabled services? Because IT is a broader field than just software development. So the scope is in the bill as well. We've listed about 70, I think. We've even listed 70 technologies and a caveat that anything technology related, right? And so we have experts on our panel. So we've done another good thing. Not only will we have a 3-step process. So one is the zone developer gets the application, assesses it, sends it to the STZ committee. The committee has experts from STZ, which are our employees, but also relevant experts from the industry we've already contacted. So let's say AI. There's 5 companies. So the AI from the industry and our guy who's head of policy and research will sit and assess, do they qualify, right? After that's all done, it goes up to the approvals committee, which also has experts. And that final tick is made, yes, you do get a license, right? So the scope is vast, but of course, in Pakistan, like in every other, it's human nature. People will try to get incentives and not really look at the spirit of what we want to do. We want it to be technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, to build the knowledge. So if someone's trying to hoodwink, we'll probably catch it. And if we don't, we can revoke a license as well. So we don't want to be a police force. We want to be very friendly, but we don't want you to abuse what the government has set as incentives as well.
Amer, so you talked about the team, the panel of experts that you will involve. Could you tell us a little more about the background of the team that you have got at the STZA to give us, you know, a little bit of an indication as to their background, their experience, what kind of people are they who are going to set up and run this entire STZA process?
Okay, so that's a wonderful question. So we and the Prime Minister just asked me, Amer, how the province is going to run it, because you guys, STZA knows this business, but provinces are calling a real estate project to nahi bana denge, right? So he kind of alluded to where's the expertise going to come from. So I'm getting the Koreans and the Chinese to come train us and the Americans. That's on our agenda as well. But yeah, our composition, Janara, is really interesting because although we're an autonomous body, we have to follow the rules of government for hiring, right? So, and we wanted to get the top people, right? So we had to get special pay packages approved by the cabinet and of course our own board, which was done, that we attract the best talent. So our management structure is basically, it's very clean. It's a director general level, and a member level, right? So 3 layers of hierarchy that report directly into the chairman. I think my own background, everyone knows I came from overseas, so I know I've been in tech for 25 years, right? So I kind of play there's a role called the CITO, Chief Innovation and Technology Officer. I've been with a large billion-dollar company. I've had my own. I've run a think tank. I've been in an educational environment. So, and then I got trained in China and Korea. So I needed people who will come in and know how to run this. And so I needed technologists. I did business people, policy people. So our mix is really diversified. We have our member for zone development, and he's a gentleman called Amer Salimi. Amer ran the largest SEZ in Pakistan, the Faisalabad one, and he got it up and running. So that was 8,000 acres. And interesting, Amer has been with one company his entire career for, I think, 20 years. Is when that started in 2000, I think, Amer joined as an associate manager, and he's just lived and breathed SEZ all his life, right? So when people applied for the post, he came outstanding. Here's a person who's built a special economic zone. Not in technology, though. Those were industrial units. But remember, power, the grid station, the land parcels, the architecture, the sewage, the water, you know what goes on in a land, right? So fantastic. Then we've got, we needed someone that really knew the government inside out more than myself, because although I've worked closely with the government, I'm not a government employee. So now we've got a member from government and regulations on deputation from FBR. And that's great. Imagine FBR is helping the tech industry. So that's really good news for the tech industry. And he's gone out of his way to even have some meetings. So we've got a member there. Our CFO, luckily, he's come from a telco IT background. So here's a finance expert. He's called Member Finance. And he comes from Etisalat's subsidiary called Mobily. So he's been in Dubai, Saudi Arabia as the Senior Vice President of Finance. But if you talk to him, he understands tech like a technologist. So that's the member layer. And then we've got, of course, we've got Rahim, who's part of the senior leadership team. He's called the CIO. That's self-explanatory. Rahim knows tech inside out. Our internal tech, our relationship with innovation clusters, all that is involved. And then we've got, of course, HR as a support function. Again, a person who's been in the tech industry. So he knows tech, so his HR. And then we've got young, and this is really exciting, John. Our directors are between the ages of 30, 35. That's the first time in the government of Pakistan that we have such young directors, purely on merit, right? So they had to go through a scrutiny process where we had panel committee, we had to have cabinet members, and all the way from policy, research, and market intelligence to licensing and contract, general counsel to marketing, who else? Special projects. So these are all director levels. Some of them report directly to me, some report to the DGs, and of course the members. So the composition is so versatile, but the one thing common in everyone has that tech flavor. They have their subject matter expertise, but they've got that tech flavor. So we're very lucky. I'm very proud and excited about the team, because that's the engine that's going to drive this. And yeah, the next question is, how are the other cities going to form theirs if ours is working on Islamabad Technopolis? So I mean, I think we can do that in part 2 of your panel sessions.
No, I'm really happy to see you speak so passionately about the team. You make STZA sound like a startup, which it feels like it is, because I feel like STZA itself.
Yeah, with the prime minister as the president of the board, it doesn't
yeah,
get better.
there you go. Yeah, and so I would also like to ask Rahim, who has recently joined in, transitioned from SECP, which is not really a startup, which is one more established business now, if you could call it. But so Rahim, how's your role been transitioning into the STZA? How do you see it growing in the future, and how do you see yourself supporting the organization?
So I think, Mubariz, the good thing is, so, and when I was also transiting into the role, and Amer and I spoke about it. So it's a very diverse team. My own background is also quite diverse. I've done tech more primarily in the financial services sector, and working at the SECP, as you know, I was leading the stream for the startup ecosystem. I was also heavily involved in launching and running the Sandbox initiative for SECP. So, and in the process, I was able to connect with the entire ecosystem, which means the investors, the VCs, locally here, internationally, as well as the corporate sector. So the idea similarly is, and I'm very, very excited. That's one of the reasons, because the vision is so great, and in terms of inclusive socio-economic growth. So very, very excited, and the reason being that just not from enabling the authority itself from a technology perspective, but also, like we talked about, the facilitation to the startups, the SMEs, the large companies, the VCs, investors, and given my association in the tech world. So I'm also helping Amer as well as the wider team on giving inputs on policy, also on the marketing front, on the investment front, etc. So I think it totally feels like a startup right now. There's high expectations. Like Amer mentioned, the kind of support we've got from the highest level, including the Prime Minister. So, I mean, we have to be laser focused in terms of our execution. And so for the time being, we are carrying on different, and I'm personally wearing different hats, trying to contribute wherever possible and, drive this forward. So, Ahmed, like mentioned, we have to, we have a rollout plan and the other zones have to be announced nationally. So, we're trying our best to make sure that we enable the Islamabad Technoplace and then move on to the other zones as well. So very exciting. It's challenging, but there are higher expectations, and I think with the team we've got on board, I think this engine will deliver the results.
So while I have you, Rahim and Amer, I would like to also want you to add something to it. But what specific government, like I know STZA has managed to aggregate a lot of different policy advantages and policy incentives. Are there any other policy incentives that the authority is right now working on with various government factors? Would that include provincial incentives as well, as far as services, provincial taxes are concerned, or provincial regulations are concerned? So if you could shed some light on that as well, I think that would be really helpful.
As far as the taxes are concerned, because it's a federal bill, the provinces are absolutely open to welcome it and accept all those as well, right? So right now with Punjab, KPK, and Sindh, they approached us themselves, and of course we want to go into Balochistan, Quetta, and Gwadar, but Gwadar of course doesn't have the populace, which is our concern. GB, and of course Mirpur and Muzaffarabad for AJK, right? So yes, the answer is the all take advantage, even though the 18th Amendment is there. But this is federal, like you've probably heard of the export processing zones. So they're also in different provinces. So the same legislation applies what EPZs are for STZA. The provinces can take those incentives fully on board, from the tax to the duty to the state bank regulations to the subsidized infrastructure. And with this, Mubariz, I want to share something really important here. And because of the youth population bulge, is Pakistan's taken on a lot of loans. And for these type of programs, we typically do take loans. So the model that we've made is probably the first time in Pakistan where state land is already existing. So we haven't paid any money for it. So we looked at global models and we said, let's give them the land parcel. Let's give them the basic infrastructure and all those facilities I said, and no money from us. So if you look at our past projects of where we took a loan from a foreign government, we built a structure, and now we're paying it back with interest. Here, Islamabad Technopolis, the government is funding the road inside, which is about 2 kilometers. So not that, the boundary wall, the gate. I'm actually sharing the exact infrastructure, the grid, and also the fiber coming in. After that, the proposals we have, they get, this is really exciting, which, yeah, your audience should know. You're going to get a discount rate that the government rate of what they gave to STZA. So no profit. STZA is not a profit-oriented authority. So we're going to give that to you at the same price over 7 years. So it's peanuts when you'll see the rates being published. Second, you own this for 30 years. You know how leases in Pakistan work typically, 33 years, 33. So we're taking the same lease and giving it to you. So it's your property for 30 years. So your build, your revenue, free market economy. That's how GDPs blossom. So that's the model, flagship model of the Islamabad one. And we hope to replicate that, of course, in Lahore and the rest of Punjab. KPK, Mardan, Haripur, and Peshawar have 3 programs. Karachi has about 3 or 4 as well. Quetta, we just had a meeting yesterday. So we'll share that. I guess that's a more detailed approach. But extremely important that Pakistan government does not need to spend money on infrastructure. So I want your message to be clear. This is not a real estate or infrastructure project. The government is not buying land. It has land that has not been utilized for decades. The land parcel in Islamabad, you guys will be shocked. 1960, CDA gave that land to NIH, National Institute of Health. Khali pada hua hai 61 years ke liye. 2021 mein STZA ko diya. So 150 acres, no economic activity for 61 years. Now you give it where foreign direct investment is coming, youth is coming, job creations ho rahe hain. It's a no-brainer. Prime Minister ne pucha 20 saal pehle ye kyun nahi kiya, right? That's how he keeps, and he didn't know the researcher said that as well. So he took the same number, maybe he read it, right? So it's a no-brainer, guys. For us, I don't even feel like sometimes justifying ke ye kyun bana rahe hain. Just pad lo ki humne kyun nahi banaya should be the reason.
Amer, so just two questions. One is, now that you have the Prime Minister's ear, he's so excited about the technology zone. Is the STZA also advising government on tech policy to some extent, or no? Are you leaving that to other players to do?
Kind of a sensitive question, but I'll address it.
All right.
As we all know, we worked with the Ministry of IT, which we worked with the Ministry of Science and Technology. I'm in my previous life, I've been in a strategic think tank. So I worked a lot on policy. So I think where STZA will be helping is where we see we have the expertise, because policy be mandate hai, where we feel we can help the ministries, whether it's on the telco side, right? Because that's everyone knows we need more fiber deployed across the country fast, right? But USF runs that comes on the Ministry of IT. The entrepreneurship world, right? And the incubation world, Ignite, the NICs. Sure, we've got a lot of expertise. So I see it more of a relationship where we'll partner. We've got money for human capital development as well. We want to use that carefully as well, because other ministries have it. So I'd say, yes, we will be involved in the policy side where we feel that the ministries concerned can use our help, and we are an independent authority. So we can give advice to any ministry, even without being invited, to say, here's something that may be of value, or to the presidency, or to the Prime Minister's office. So we've just got a dedicated director and a secretariat called Policy, Research, and Market Intelligence. And fantastic person there, Dr. Ali, who's worked in the Xinhua Science and Technology Park. So the only Pakistani in Pakistan that has worked in one of the best science parks in the world, and that's Xinhua Universities, that is in a tech zone in Beijing. So he came to Pakistan, moved, and of course, and when he was in North America, he'd been involved a lot in technology. So he's heading our cell, or secretary, you may call, for Policy, Research, and Market Intelligence, which will concentrate on the policies.
Okay, so Amer,
just to add on to what Amer said, and I think Amer, perhaps you want to also talk about the plans of the Global Advisory Council, right? So I think that will also bring in a lot of learnings from these well-known people who in the tech industry globally, and I think that will provide the learnings and the insights, which I think we're already in a very collaborative way working with the different government departments, and I think that will also eventually share and work together in terms of scaling up the service agenda for us.
Okay, so you both got Mubariz and me very excited about what STZA is going to do. So my next question is, how can we, as part of the startup ecosystem, help you?
Oh, great question. I'll just follow on last comment of Rahim, and I'll answer that. There was a lot of questions of the composition of our board, right? So a board's role, it's called the BOG. There's 4 federal ministers, and it's not by name, it's by their position, because that's relevant to the authority. And then there's independent board directors. There's one from Silicon Valley, and now you're seeing the news about Chip. So he's the highest ranking person from AMD, and he was part of Broadcom, right? So a person who knows, and of course, software security. And then a board is designed not with just tech people. A board is designed with people who know governance, who have a global network, and understand how technology can help the nation, right? So because that's limited, and we had to have them having a Pakistani background, the Global Technology Advisory Council that the Prime Minister will head as its patron. These are any names that will come on the Global Advisory Council that we plan are our industry giants. So of course you guys will be part of there and a lot of other. We plan a 3-month brainstorm. Brainstorm means the Prime Minister took out, I think 3-4 hours at NDU when this was being launched, and he was giving, so he's got a lot of stamina, more than youngsters, sometimes I've seen. So he's going to chair a meeting with the world's leading tech personalities. And after that, we're going to synthesize their recommendation, like Rahim said, and hamari policy mein wo bahut help kare. We've never done that in the world before. Pakistan has not reached out to the Chinese tech leaders, the European tech leaders, the North American tech leaders, and say, hey, help us. They're willing. They're billionaires. They'll fly in. We'll show them Pakistan as well. And they'll give us such good insight that we may not have thought of. So that's also the exciting part of the policy that I forgot to mention and Rahim brought up. So how can you help was your question. Both of you, a huge network, and I think the pulse, I always feel when your niyat is right for your audience, your intent and your hard work, then natural progression it pays off, right? So we feel that this is such a pure initiative. And I have to thank the government of Pakistan. They've allowed this to be run like Prime Minister's word. Can we make a dynamic and agile state authority? And so far, mashallah, Allah ka shukr hai, it's been working like that. And we want full support from not just organizations like yourself, but even the government adaras are coming on board. And I think where we need your help is to help us, and maybe during the awareness campaign, become partners with us to get the message out there that this is for the people of Pakistan directly. It's not a show and dance. The words are not a show and dance. You do need to have a title of a technical authority in there, so technology is there. But it wasn't for the attraction just to say we're going to do this. So how this really translates into GDP, Janara, is where I feel excited and proud that the Pakistanis' average citizen life will improve. Because the billionaires are doing well. A billionaire can move to London, Dubai, or the US and still have the same lifestyle that he had in Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad. Hamara jo initiative hai, and the drive, what excites me and why I click with the Prime Minister so much on it resides with me. दो चीजें पूछते हैं हर वक्त कि आमिर यूथ के लिए ये वेल्थ क्रिएशन करेगा और जॉब क्रिएशन करेगा और नॉलेज लाएगा, और नेशन के लिए टेक्नोलॉजी और इंपोर्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन, और आमिर गरीब के लिए क्या करेगा. So I love that because he feels that if we can get tech out there, and Gharib doesn't mean just the rural sector, urban centers maybe hamare areas hain. So when we can take Janara, a farmer that is just working on crop in the traditional agri where he's just planting and watering, 5,000 रुपए कमा रहा होगा. Imagine उसके अगर agri tech develop करके उसको billable कर दें और उसको $500 मिल जाए. That's 80,000 rupees. 5,000 to 80, उसकी पूरी खानदान की life change हो जाएगी, right? Women, we're a closed society, right? Technology, you need, as big as my office, you can fit 10 women in your own laptops. Their self-sustainable income हो जाती है stream, dependency खत्म हो जाती है, So it's so important because our women ratio to men in Pakistan don't have jobs. So the zones will be a facilitating environment for all of this, right? So for your request on how, I think strategic partnership, we should formalize it, and every step of the way. I call this everyone's authority. It's not just my team and the chairman. This is Pakistan's, right? It's for everyone to participate in any capacity they want. It's for the growth of our GDP. I truly believe that if we can get $1 billion worth of government projects out there, and we can convince PEPRA to make 3 or 4s where we can quickly, with transparency, award contracts and get STZs in these cities I mentioned by June 30th, 2022, at least started, Some of them will be very fast, some will be slow. I think in 2 to 3 years, our domestic plus our export could be at 6 billion. I truly believe that, right? That will then allow you कि exponential इससे growth हो सकती है. अगर वो critical 2 सालों में even 5 billion पे पहुंच जाए, वो अगर हो जाए, then the sky's the limit because your foundation will be built for this.
Totally. I can't believe we've been talking for 1 whole hour and it seems we've only just scratched the surface. So Mubariz, we'll have to do this again as a part 2 and a part 3 maybe, because other than the regional, there's always, there's so much depth.
There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we will have to do several sessions before we can become more knowledgeable about exactly what Amer and Rahim and the team are going to be up to. But thanks so much, Amer, Rahim, and thank you, Mubariz, for co-hosting and for actually setting it all up. It was Mubariz's idea to do this, and I think it was a great one because there have been so many questions from so many quarters. And when people don't understand something, there is always suspicion. There's always, misinformation. And I think this session will no doubt clarify a lot of things. And if there are further questions that people put to us, we will certainly send them to you. I think it's a general awareness campaign, as you said, Amer, and we will try and help spread the word because at least in the startup ecosystem and in the technology industry, we are known for supporting good initiatives, and it's great. Mubariz, final word?
No, I'm actually quite, I've obviously met Amer before and I've met Rahim before, but I'm actually understanding a lot of things myself. And what I absolutely love is the mindset whereby the mindset is to be more inclusive and to be empowering small businesses as opposed to acting like a police thing and being a gatekeeper. So I absolutely love that. It actually sounds like a startup where the CEO is Amer and the Prime Minister is an angel investor slash has an advisory role where he's constantly supporting them throughout. But kudos to you for organizing and managing so many great incentives and aligning them, major policy changes in such short time. It's not very often that we see that such drastic changes are made with this speed. So really heartened by this conversation, and we're happy to support this initiative in any way we can.
Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you for having us.